Good morning, Cowboys Nation, and welcome back to another episode of the Writer's Block podcast. I am your host, David Howman. This time not joined by my co-host, as always, Brandon Clemens and Chris Halling. They're both off this week, much like the Cowboys taking Monday off from training camp. But training camp is here, is back. We got plenty to talk about with the Cowboys. And for that, we have a very special guest today. You know her from a couple different shows with the Dallas Cowboys. Girls Talk, Boys Talk, the draft show. Iisha Morrison, welcome to the Writer's Block. So happy to have you. How are you feeling today?
Dude, I'm happy. Football is starting to feel kind of real. You know, we're not speculating like we was talking about offline, but we starting to get some real information. So it feels like the season just ended, and here we are. So I'm very happy to be here. This is a long time coming. So it's happy to be here with you.
Yeah, and definitely happy to have you on. I was telling you before the show too, and I'll say it here just to pump you up too. I feel like every time I hear you speak, I learn something new, either about the game of football or about the Dallas Cowboys. So it really is a pleasure having you on here. And it is a pleasure having training camp started up again and having like real football, even though it's not a game. Just like seeing the football players out there doing their thing. We're not well, I was going to say we're not still arguing about all these contracts and everything going on. But we are, because it's still nothing's happened. We're, of course, as always, coming to you Tuesday morning, but we're recording this Monday night, and Monday night there's been a few little whispers out there on the Twitter sphere, the X sphere, whatever you may call it these days, that seems like it may suggest CeeDee Lamb may be close to a contract extension. So, you know, if that's come out since we've recorded this, then we'll look foolish for talking about it. But Iisha, why hasn't it happened yet?
Listen. One thing about me, I ain't ever really been that great at numbers unless it's football stats. So I ain't get too deep into all of that. However, I don't understand the Cowboys' ideology when it comes to contracts and stuff. We've seen plenty of times across the league that the sooner the better. That's why you see Jordan Love getting his money after one season. It's just, you know, it's what the market calls for. CeeDee Lamb has done more than enough to earn this contract. One thing that I think that goes unnoticed is the fact that he has been healthy for the majority of so far. I mean, last year didn't miss a single snap for injury. He takes care of his body. He's committed. They put him in a position to where he had to really show he was a number one and show up with the loss of Amari. He rose to the occasion. He dictates how teams have to play defense. This is a guy that you want on your team. And with the way that he and Dak really showed their connection last year, to know that they can maybe build upon that even more, it's like a no-brainer. And so you would think, I personally thought that the CeeDee contract is the easiest one. The easiest one. Never in trouble off the field, always in team meetings, always has a good spirit. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I need them to hurry it up. I need them to figure it out.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point I hadn't even thought about with CeeDee and like his availability. Like,
yes,
because we always talk about, like, you know, there's players out there on the Cowboys elsewhere,
right?
They're talented, but they're just not always dependable. I mean, Tyron Smith. I don't think there's a single Cowboys fan out there that will say Tyron Smith was bad or there was a good thing they got rid of him. But also, like, you know, he's not going to play a full season at this point.
You know that. No,
CeeDee is reliable. He's reliable to show up on the field and play. He's reliable when he's out there making plays. It's funny. I just started watching the Netflix show Receiver that focuses on a few different pass catchers out there. Have you had a chance to watch that yet?
I glanced at it, but
you got other stuff to do.
I glanced.
Yeah. Well, so the first episode, I won't get into too many spoilers for anybody out there that hasn't watched it yet, but two of the players they focus on is George Kittle, Deebo Samuel. The first episode ends with that Cowboys 49ers game, and I was just like, man, I don't want to watch this again. It felt like torture. But another player they focus on is Justin Jefferson, who, of course, got paid very recently, got paid very much what he's worth. And you would think a CeeDee Lamb deal is probably somewhere in that range too. But this past year, I mean, Justin Jefferson missed almost half the season. He went on IR, and he still got his money.
And
CeeDee Lamb, yeah, he produces at the same level, I think, and is, to your point, he's more available.
Yep.
And then of course Jerry Jones mentioned that I think it was Jerry, it might have been Steven, at the opening remarks for the training camp, saying, well, they can do that because they're not paying a quarterback. But then there's Jordan Love, there's Tua Tagovailoa, who also got his deal. He's making like $53.1 million, and they're paying Jalen Waddle, they're paying Tyreek Hill, they're paying Bradley Chubb. So like they're paying other guys too, and they were still able to pay their quarterback and their receiver and their pass rusher.
Talk about it.
So I mean, but I digress. There, we've all talked about the contract situation. It seems like, at least with CD, it seems like that's something that's going to get done. It's just a matter of putting pen to paper. And I know me and Chris and Brandon have talked at this point ad nauseum about Dak. But where are you as far? What's your take on Dak and his contract negotiations and comments that have been made here or there? Like, do you think it's going to happen? Do you think that he'll be somewhere else next year? Thoughts on Trey Lance, because we've gotten into a lot of discussions about Trey Lance and whether or not he's the answer going forward too.
So what I will say is, number one, let me say, franchise quarterback, reason people have convinced themselves is that they just grow on trees. I don't know what world y'all living in, but they don't. Ask the Bears. So, it's just weird to me how people handle the franchise quarterback thing. And when you find one, I mean, Dak is not some guy. This is a guy that was second in MVP voting last year. Fantastic in his play and also to his development. I think that's something that gets a little undershadowed when you talk about, I think it was 2019 when you could tell that he made the decision to become a better quarterback. And so we started seeing the mechanics clear up. We started seeing some of the accuracy clean up. We saw the interceptions go down the next year. It's just, like, he's committed himself to becoming a better player. And so for me, I feel like I would love for him to still be on this team. And I wouldn't understand. It wouldn't make sense to me for him to not be back on this team, because that implies you have a plan and that you are for sure that plan is going to work. And if the Cowboys, they've lucked up on the last couple quarterbacks they had. Baby, you ain't drafting quarterback that well. So it's like, what makes you think that it's going to be gravy once he's gone? So it sounds like, the Cowboys have pushed a couple of deals his way. And when you look across the NFL and you look at these other quarterbacks getting paid right now, it's, as far as play goes and things like that, people are looking at the playoff records, which I guess has relevancy. But I'm just saying in general, like, he's as good as those guys, if not better than a lot of those guys. The market is the market. Pay the dude and just go about your business, because somebody else is going to do it. That's what drives me. That's what drives me absolutely nuts, is that we know that somebody else in the NFL is going to pay him. So why not just do it? Please. Yeah. Do it. Just get him paid, get it taken care of. But I mean, to answer your question, I do think there has been there's been some back and forth. I think it's just finding the number that's suitable to them. But I wholeheartedly believe that the Cowboys kind of shot themselves in the foot, because you've seen all these quarterbacks get paid before Dak. You've seen all these receivers get paid before CeeDee Lamb. The price has gone up, and these guys have most of the leverage. So yeah. We've seen the Cowboys, I don't know why they like doing things like this. They like to get to the end. They like to procrastinate. Man, that sounds like my ADHD. You know what?
I was just going to say, I was like, I can relate in the sense of like, he's like, I do my laundry. I put it in the hamper. It sits there, I've had times where like I put it off. And then when I finally like take it out of the hamper, like put it all up and everything, I'm like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Like next time I should just do it right away. But also like when I make that mistake with the laundry and I don't put it away, like we're not losing, tens of millions of dollars. Like the stakes aren't as high. And to your point, like the price has gone up. The price went up just this last week with both Love and Tua.
Right.
And like you said with Love, like he was just had his first year as a starter. He didn't even have a full season of good games. Like he caught on at the last half.
He won like 7 games.
Yeah. And granted, one of those was over the Cowboys in the playoffs, but like just about everybody's had a win over the Cowboys in the playoffs at this point.
Right. And they're doing it the way that it should be done. So, as far as the contracts go, though, I will say, don't overcomplicate it. Just get it done so we can just go through the season. I mean, you got a whole bunch of coaches on 1-year deals. Ain't nobody got time for this. Like, sew up somebody. Somebody do something. So I'm cool. I'm cool with the negotiations. I understand that it's a business and there's things that go on, but for the betterment of your team, rationally, I wouldn't understand not signing either of them. None of them. Micah, CD, and Dak. It's if you do that, you're going backwards and not forwards to me. So
totally agree. Yeah. And I firmly agree with your point about they've looked into these quarterbacks too. And I've said this before because both Brandon and Chris, more so Brandon, these guys aren't here to defend themselves, so I'll be fair to them.
Okay.
But Brandon has been very, very adamant that he thinks Trey Lance is going to be a star and that he is firmly in the camp of pay Dak. But if it doesn't happen, he thinks Trey Lance can be the future. And I've said, like, look, you may be right. Like, the 49ers drafted him 3rd overall for a reason, but also he's not with the 49ers for a reason. And Kyle Shanahan has proven he can get some good quarterback play out of people. But looking at the Cowboys and how they evaluate quarterbacks, like Tony Romo was an undrafted free agent in 2016. Like they tried to trade up for Paxton Lynch in the first round. They wanted to draft Connor Cook later in that draft. I don't know where those guys are playing these days, but it's not the
NFL. So, but I mean, as far as the Trey Lance thing, I will say, so I was looking at, I actually have some film from some notes from the film that I was looking at with him. This gentleman is still, and we saw Shanahan and those guys be very vulnerable in how they felt like his development was, and the ways that they felt like maybe they could have been better to him in helping him through his development and helping him through his injuries and things like that. So with that, he's coming here. He's with Mike McCarthy. Dak Prescott pours into him. If I'm not mistaken, he actually went with Dak and the guys to Oregon to train to kind of sharpen up those skills. When I look at some of the things that they're doing in practice with him offensively, you can tell very quickly that they see that he's comfortable doing play action, run action, using his athleticism, but getting him throwing on the move seems like one of the best things he can do right now. First day in practice wasn't too hot, but this is his first training camp with the Cowboys, and it is lights, camera, action. It's a different breed, right? But second day, we start seeing a little bit more comfort from him, him delivering the ball with some anticipation, kind of getting in a flow. Mike McCarthy commented and said that we will see a lot of Trey Lance in the preseason, and I'm happy about that because I do think he needs the opportunity to get into a rhythm and feel football again. Like, we have to realize, like, this guy hasn't played in a game real time, even on preseason level, in almost 2 years now. Like, it's been a minute. So him getting in the flow of doing quarterback things is something we are going to have to wait to do. Furthermore, you know what you got in Cooper Rush. He is going to get it done, from a scheme standpoint. He can hold down the fort. The guys believe in him. But in a situation where you may need like a little bit more, I'm not sure if he's capable of doing that in that regard. Like, his athleticism is not going to jump off the charts. He's not going to be doing a whole bunch of run. And that's like the thing with Trey Lance is if Trey Lance can't come along, the beautiful thing about him is that there's a lot of similarities in he and Dak's play. And so you would hope you wouldn't have to completely alter your offense, which is what you look for in a backup quarterback, right? You look for a guy that you wouldn't have to. And I think it would be a drastic difference between him and then a Cooper Rush if Trey Lance was ready. So this is just something to keep an eye on. I'm trying to stay level-headed about it because, again, he is just now getting in the flow of football again. But I do think he's capable. And one thing he does take seriously is film study. He's very teachable. He's very coachable, and that's half the battle. So we just gonna keep our eye on it, man, because he's looked better as camp is going on to me so far. Now,
Mhm.
a lot of other people that don't think that, but that's where I stand on it
Right.
right now.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see in some preseason games, especially since it sounds like he's going to get plenty of work. I'm
Yeah.
excited to see how that looks, especially because, like to your point, like he's still developing. When he came into the NFL, he had like I think it was like just 13 games at North Dakota State, and like very small sample size against not quality opponent when you're talking about making the jump to the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And like he was raw coming in. He's raw now with the Cowboys. But then I also go back to like Mike McCarthy and his reputation as a QB guru, the work he did grooming Aaron Rodgers when he came into the NFL, how Dak Prescott his first year with McCarthy calling the plays, he's runner up for MVP. Like
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if he looks good, but it's going to be interesting to see with all this talk about like all these things going on with the contract situation with the QB, like what next year looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It's not been the most positive offseason.
You said
And that was the motivation for me when I got this shirt, which I don't know if you can see. If I drink enough, even the Cowboys look good.
wow.
Um, and got it from one of my favorite shops, Bull Zerk in the Dallas Farmers Market. They have great stuff all over, but this one really spoke to me as a Cowboys fan who is just still recovering from that Packers loss. And so that's another reason I'm excited about training camp, being able to wash away that bad taste, because we've all
Yeah.
still been dealing with it since then. Of course, with training camp, there's also the negatives, the downsides, which is now there's a greater chance for player injuries, and unfortunately, the Cowboys had that happen with Sam Williams. We've already seen a couple of other players around the league get some really bad news and horrible developments, but with Sam Williams in particular, when he first went down, it was kind of we heard like the Cowboys feared the worst. Came back, confirmed he tore his MCL and ACL, done for the season. Obviously, devastating in general, but especially with Williams, like it seemed like he was going to be, taking a bigger step this year. He was going to be kind of that top edge rushing backup behind Micah and DeMarcus Lawrence, with Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong going to the Commanders in the offseason. I mean, I've been a Sam Williams stan since his rookie year. I was excited about him when they drafted him. He's popped off, every time he's on defense. Sometimes looks good on special teams. There's some other issues there, but I mean, one, just like how devastating is this, and then two, like what do you think the Cowboys do from here? Like, do they rely on Marshawn Nealon and some other guys? Are they looking at free agents? Like, where do they go from here with something like this happening so early in camp?
I mean, yeah. And again, like, definitely sending prayers to Sam Williams. It's listen, man, like these ACL, MCL injuries, stuff like that, it's not an easy thing to come back from. I think sometimes we look at these athletes and we see them back in a year, and we expect them back in a year, like, or we expect to at least see them moving around, running and doing all this stuff. And the recovery and rehab for these things are serious. It's a lot of isolation. It takes a lot of willpower and faith to get through these things. So we definitely wishing the best for Sam, and I am disappointed, to your point about the fact that this was supposed to be like a big year for him. And even listen to Mike Zimmer with his interview with the fan, and I think he also did one with the ticket. You can even tell his disappointment in some of the plans that he had for Sam, and his speed and some of the explosiveness that he plays with. It's just a really unfortunate situation. Now, as far as where you go from here, I did see that the Cowboys are kind of searching, sniffing out some of these DNs that are available around the NFL right now. But I do see that they definitely are going to tackle some things internally. Like, we know how they get down in that regard. Like, they're going to see what they have with their depth and some of the guys they have. I mentioned a Darrell Johnson out of Liberty. He was drafted last year. He's a sack machine when he was at Liberty. Cowboys brought him in as an undrafted free agent last year. He flashed a couple times in preseason. And so he's a gentleman that you keep your eye on. He has a lot of size, but he has some speed as well. Pure pass rusher, so we'll see how he is playing the run. But he's a gentleman that to keep an eye out on. Tyrus Wheat, the DN that does some linebacker things, is another guy to keep an eye on. Again, a bigger edge, a lot of size, not a whole bunch of speed, but his power can be pressing for tackles because he's so big and physical. We're looking for Villanami Fahoko, that was drafted last year, dealt with a shoulder injury last year. He is a unique being, super high motor, can rush the passer at a high clip, but he plays the run very well. He did in college. The film, he played the run very well in college. So he's another guy we're looking at to make a jump. And then you have someone like you mentioned Marshawn Nealon. Listen, it's not a whole bunch of talking that needs to be done about him. If you watch the draft show, you know how I feel about Marshawn Nealon. Very excited that he's here. And honestly, it sounds like a lot of Cowboys Nation was like, "What the heck with this pick?" Oh baby, you gonna find out real quick why they're blessed to have drafted him with the loss of Sam Williams. And then you have a guy like Chauncey Golston, who I hear was taking some snaps at DN again because of the loss of Sam. If this is going to push Chauncey back to DN where he belongs and where he was one of the best run stoppers in the Big Ten when he was with Iowa, I'm with it. Like, let him play his original position. I beg of you. I beg. And so I'm sorry, I know that was like kind of lengthy going down the draft chart, but I just wanted to talk about each and every guy that's on this on this roster. And it, as far as the DNs go, almost all those guys I mentioned, except for Chauncey, are unproven. So this is a unique spot to be in. So I do still see them bringing in a veteran, regardless of any of these gentlemen step up.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did, just because there are some names out there. Yannick Ngakoue he's a big name. He's played for Mike Zimmer, albeit briefly in the past. Carl Lawson actually tweeted out the same day the star emoji. I don't know if that's related or like maybe he was given his rating for the new Deadpool movie. Hopefully it wasn't that, because I hear it's a good movie.
It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cameos was bomb.
Better than 1 star.
It's better than 1 star.
Okay.
Yeah.
But to your point though too, like I think there is some good depth here, especially if you're looking at Chauncey Golston moving back to the edge of the line, which is where he belongs. I remember when the Cowboys first drafted him, in that same draft, like we hadn't really been looking too much at edge players in that draft. But when I looked at Chauncey playing in Iowa, I was like, this guy, I mean, he's an Iowa player to a T. Like they coach defense so well there, and he played it so well. And he was a really great, like you said, really great run stuffer, set the edge really well. I've been a little disappointed that we didn't get to see him on the edge, especially considering they needed somebody to be setting the edge in the run besides DeMarcus Lawrence the last couple of years. But, that's neither here nor there. Mike Zimmer's the guy in charge now. He cares about run defense. And Fahoko too. Like he was one of my biggest draft crushes last year. I was really disappointed when it was announced that they were going to try him at a 3 technique after they drafted him too, because I was like, why? Like he's good on the edge. But
please,
hey, Dan Quinn is way more qualified to be a coach in the NFL than I am. So, credit where it's due.
Okay.
No comment.
I mean, I just think, like, listen, and especially covering the draft, like we see this a lot, is people are drafted as one thing and then teams get them and they have a vision for them. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I wholeheartedly believe that if a guy does something, especially too, because I feel like in the last 3 years, I remember I asked the scout Brett Maxey when he came on the draft show. I said, what is one of the trends of the NFL right now that you've noticed as a scout? And he said speed rushers. speed rusher. That's what people want. So that's why you see the Austin Bookers and the Nolan Smiths and guys like that getting drafted where they're not super big, because a lot of people like edges to have size, kind of like Tank, because you got to build up that frame to be able to really take the beating that you're going to take in the run game and be efficient. But you're seeing more guys like it's either this or it's that with edges right now. Either you have a guy that rushes the passer at a very high clip and he does it really well, or you have a guy that can stop the run that doesn't have as much pass rush ability. So when you come across one like a Marshawn Nealon, when you come across one, you it's a blessing, right? So I feel like with Chauncey Golston, I do think that a lot of coaches in general, revert back. With a lot of coaches in general, they're starting to do this mix and match and hybrid type, tweener type thing, and that's cute. But when you get in the playoffs and people like, hey, bro, it's January, we running the ball. What you gonna do? We seen it. We saw it all through the playoffs. Is the teams that could go power and run at you and drain the clock, those are the ones that have success. So you need edges that are able to get hit in the mouth and keep playing. So Chauncey Golston is one of those guys. I'm really hoping that he gets to go back to his original position. But the depth at DT might be one of the reasons why we're seeing him still kind of flip-flop, because we're still unsure about the interior of this defensive line as well, minus Oso Digizua. So, yeah.
And we'll touch on the interior in a sec, but I just wanted to point out, like, I think that's so fascinating about like what you said about looking for those slimmer speed rushers, because like I feel like we've seen a lot of evolution in NFL offenses the last 5-10 years, and it seems like the defenses are always like just a step behind what the next change is. Like we've seen a lot of mobile quarterbacks come into the NFL and have a lot of success recently, and so now we're throwing the ball. You have to be fast to catch these quarterbacks, and so then they're like, okay, let's pivot to prioritizing speed in the pass rush,
right?
And now we're seeing NFL teams that are like running the ball. I mean, just about every team runs the Shanahan offense, which is run the ball all the time. The Lions run the ball, the 49ers run the ball really well. The Ravens, I mean, when Greg Roman was their offensive coordinator, all they did was run the ball. And even with Todd Monken running the offense last year, now I'm questioning myself if it was Todd or Jeff, but either way, the Monken coach who's coaching the offense in Baltimore, he opened up the pass more, but they're still a run-heavy team because they have Lamar Jackson, because they have a really deep stable of running backs. Like the teams that are really, really good either have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, or you have a really good rushing offense, and defense has got to stop that.
Right.
And at some point, you got to have some beef. And as you said, with the interior of this defensive line, that was a stated goal this offseason. Will McClay said at, I believe it was the combine, he said, we're looking to add some beef in the trenches. Well, they got that, one by virtue of Mozzie Smith getting his weight back up. They drafted Justin Rogers, who's a whole mountain of a dude.
He's a big dude.
Huh?
He's a big dude.
Yeah, he looks gigantic just on film.
Yeah.
And they brought back Carl Davis, who's a pretty hefty guy. And Mozzie, to his credit, like everyone was mad at him last year, first round pick, first time in forever that they've drafted a defensive tackle in the first round, and he did not pan out. But also, like, he slimmed down. He didn't have the same weight he had in college. He wasn't playing the same role he had in college.
Yes.
He looks bigger this year. He looks faster. Patrick Walker, also with the Dallas Cowboys, we're all a fan of him here. He said he tweeted out a video of the defensive line getting off on a drill against the offensive line, and said Mozzie Smith beat everyone on this except for Sam Williams. Might have actually beat Sam by a hair too, saying like he's bigger, he's stronger, he's back to what he was in college, but he's also gotten quicker. Like he's getting off the line faster, which bodes well both as a pass rusher, but primarily try to get upfield to occupy space and stop these runs.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. From what I know and some of the things I've heard about Mozzie so far, yes, he has put back on a good amount of the size, but also too, his get off, to your point, is better, and his feet, because really truly, I think his feet and his trigger was just a little behind last year, where he was laid off the ball, laid off the whistle, and a lot of that to me was because his feet weren't quick enough in that moment. We know he has the athleticism, so I personally, maybe it was, to your point, what they were asking him to do, the processing, maybe him second guessing certain things, because this dude was on the freak list. I don't like using that word in regard to athletes, but he was on the freak list. Like, this gentleman can really jump and really, he's pretty fast to be his size, and we know the power that he can play with. So really what they're focusing on, shout out to Jeff Zanina. He came over from the Commanders. Shout out to him, because they're doing a lot of things to continue to develop him as a one tech, which is not an easy thing. I think, listen, this is a position that requires patience. It requires time. And again, the processing, the two gapping, the holding up double teams and stuff, it does take time developmentally to be comfortable and confident doing those things at a high clip. So for him, we're just keeping an eye on him and how he's developing and how things pan out for him during camp. But like, you need him. you you don't have time. I mean, like, do we have patience for him to continue to develop his stuff? Sure. But baby, I'm looking at this depth chart.
Showtime.
Who's who? So
Yeah.
it's about that time.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like we're 4 practices in now with training camp, and coming Tuesday morning. Tuesday is when the pads come on, which is when all this stuff with the trenches really gets interesting, because you can tell a little bit about these guys, but when the pads come on is when you really start to see. And then of course in the preseason, when they're really going full steam, like that's where a lot of this stuff is really going to get decided. We're really going to know where Mozzie Smith is, where Chauncey Golston is, where all these other guys along the trenches are. And in the case of Micah Parsons, I mean, I don't know how much he'll actually play in the preseason, but it might be quite literally where he is, because new defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer has been using him a few different places. We've seen him working in off-the-ball linebacker drills. We've seen him working on the edge, which is where he's been primarily working. I feel like with Micah's rookie year, like Dan Quinn kind of played him all over. Right. And we all got really excited about, oh, he can do everything, right? And then he said after that, well, he's great at rushing the passer. Let's have him rush the passer all the time, which I don't think is necessarily wrong. But it's also exciting to have a guy that you can line up anywhere you feel like. And I want to read this quote from Mike Zimmer, actually, that he said on the ticket. He said, I'm not speaking about Micah Parsons. He said, I'm not sure he couldn't play every position out there, to be honest with you. He's got acceleration, great quickness, extremely brilliant, has power and strength. We're trying to figure out a lot of different ways to move him. One week he might be doing this. Next week he might be doing something else. We're trying to get him one-on-ones as many times as possible. Playoff games come, and a lot of the games they struggled with last year, they knew where he was, they found him, and they did a good job. Sometimes we're going to have to use him when offenses are focused on him. We're going to be bringing people from the other side. They can't just sit there and key on him. Do you also get goosebumps hearing that, or is that just me?
Oh no, dude, I'm ecstatic. And you mentioned the fact that they're moving Micah around. It's not just Micah. You're seeing the ends flip sides. We're seeing DeMarcus Lawrence go to left end, go back to right end, go back to the interior, and that is a part of this defense. That's what I think makes a defense fun. Like, I think that's what makes a defense harder to scheme against, and that's what Zimmer was talking about. Now, I will say, I had to really think about why Dan Quinn would just put Micah at edge. And I think it goes back to what you were talking about earlier when we were talking about Chauncey Golston, is the fact that you have not found a concrete edge opposite of Tank to really seal off that edge, contain, and to, be able to hold that side of the field down. And I believe that Dan Quinn maybe felt as though Micah was his best option with that. because when you go down the depth chart and you look at a Dante Fowler, pure pass rusher, could do some things in a run, but he was highly penalized. And it was exhausting sometimes. It was in key moments. Who's the other gentleman? Oh, you think about a Dorrance Armstrong. Same situation. Can rush the passer, but didn't have the willingness to stop the run. Like, he just didn't have the feel for it consistently. And people attack that. Then you go down to a Sam Williams. Sam Williams still developing, still trying to gain the discipline to stay square, to not bite on the RPOs, because we know offenses are attacking the edges more than anyone. I think that Dan decided to do that with Micah specifically because who else was there that was going to do it? And, you know, even if Micah was undersized in some instances, or even if he maybe read it wrong, you know, he had the recovery speed to still capture the edge, right? To at least, you know, make a difference. And people would, but I think that Dan did that out of necessity. And so, you know, back to the original topic we were talking about, DN, I mean, it's still important for them to establish that at this point is an edge that's going to hold it down over there, because I feel like teams are just attacked. Who's going to run at DeMarcus Lawrence? Everybody and their mama know he's one of the best run defenders in the NFL. So they're going to go to the opposite side. And if you don't have anyone to stop it, which we have not, you screw. So it's like, it's to me, I do think that that's a big part of why Dan was doing that in the first place. And so hopefully they can find some, you know, support in that area. And with Micah, it's going to allow him to play free and to move around, and you can really play the matchup game, because you already know, like, that's what makes me excited when coaches coach game by game, because you have your system. You can have your system, but every team is different. So it's like when you have the guys that you can move around and like pull or whatever, this is going to require the other guys on the defensive line to be in their film and to be in their playbook too. Because if it sounds like a lot of this defense is predicated over where Micah is, you gonna need to be doing your job, because you might be one place like a few snaps and a whole another place the other snaps, because you have a Micah. So it just is what it is. So I'm excited about it. I know that was long-winded, but I'm excited about Micah everywhere.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see it in action too. When Mike Zimmer was like first hired, or when they were like talking about bringing him in, the first thing I thought of, because like I love Mike Zimmer defenses. I remember back after the 2019 season, you know, because we were coming to the end of that, and like we all kind of knew Jason Garrett was probably walking out the door. Defense was probably going to change. I had written an article at the time arguing for. At the time, Zimmer was the Vikings head coach, and they were having a solid year. And I advocated for hiring, at the time, Raiders defensive coordinator Paul Guenther, who, of course, is now in Dallas as the run game coordinator, and who had been a Zimmer disciple for a very long time in Cincinnati.
Can you tell us? Like, I'm sorry.
What's that?
Can you tell us about him?
Oh yeah, I mean, Paul Guenther. I mean,
I would love that.
he's. I don't want to say he's a Mike Zimmer clone, because personality-wise, I feel like he's a little softer around the edges. But I mean, he was a linebackers coach for a while in Cincinnati when Zimmer was a defensive coordinator. When Zimmer left for the Minnesota job, Guenther took over the defensive coordinator job, and they remained one of the best defenses in the league for a few years. And then they kind of got to that point where like Geno Atkins was getting older. Carlos Dunlap, Michael Johnson were getting older. They needed an infusion of talent. So, you know, the play kind of fell off a little bit. He ended up going to the Raiders with John Gruden when he was first hired back as the head coach there. Of course, we all know that didn't quite pan out. They made some curious draft decisions, especially on defense. But I've always been fascinated by this defense, especially their split mug front. There's a few different names that people call it, but like where you've got those two linebackers standing up, lined up in the double A gaps, and they're faking that blitz. And sometimes they blitz. Sometimes Zimmer will bring a slot corner blitzing and drop those guys into coverage. And there's just like so many things you can do. He drops defensive ends into coverage sometimes, like, and there's the most common versions where like he's got those two linebackers in the A gap, and essentially what they're going to do, almost like a defensive version of the option play. If the center turns right, the one to his left is blitzing. If the center turns left, the one to his right is blitzing. Like, no matter what you do, you're wrong. And that's what I love about the way Zimmer schemes these things up. And the thought of like what he can do with Micah, he can line him up in the A gap, he can put him out on the edge. Like, it just creates so many problems. And like, you can put them on the edge and the offense is going to adjust their slide protection to go to that side, drop them into coverage, bring both those linebackers. Like, so many options that you can do there. And then you talk about a guy like Donovan Wilson or some of these other safeties coming down as being potential blitzers. Like, I just get excited. But like, thinking about what we're talking about right now with Micah and being kind of like the key and basing it all around him, of saying like, yeah, sometimes we're going to just send him after the quarterback because he's one of the best in the NFL at doing that. But also other times we know that they're going to send everything they have after him. So we're just going to use him essentially as a decoy, and all these other guys are going to feast. Like, I'm really excited to see it all play out.
No, and you know what's crazy is, like, I had said, I did a previous show where I was talking to someone about the safeties and just how creative Zimmer is, you know, with his usage. You know, we're going to see more split safety. We're going to see some of that stuff. But I was kind of like, well, where does – because – and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Zimmer isn't a guy that is super – in love with the strong safety the way that Dan Quinn was. I felt like Dan Quinn, that was one of the draft profile things, is like when you were looking for a strong safety, looking for a hard hitter, strong tackler, plays with some fire. You know what I'm saying? Like that.
The next Cam Chancellor. Yeah.
But that's what Donovan Wilson's been. That's what Marquise Bell, I thought, was going to be. It might be in this system before he started doing linebacker things. That's essentially why he started doing linebacker things.
Right.
But that kind of fit the profile for what you were looking at safety, especially since they did so much big nickel stuff. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, who are your two most free safties? And you only have one, Malik Hooker, and then you have Awanye Thomas, who I thought could do some of the rangy stuff back there. But the thing about it is that you have to do a lot of stuff in Zimmer's system, because to your point earlier, he's dropping guys. He's bringing guys on blitz. He's showing and going. He's doing it's complex in its own special way. And so I was worried about a guy like a Donovan Wilson, because I was like, you know, where does he fit? And then we got to training camp and I'm looking and I'm like, is that a safety blitz? Is that a nickel blitz I see? You know what I'm saying? Like, because that was something that Dan Quinn kind of got away from. In 2022, we saw Donovan Wilson. 2022, 2023, we saw Donovan Wilson have 7-8 sacks that year. The most sacks out of any safety or DB in the NFL at that time. Like, and that it was effective. It was very effective. And we didn't get to see that as much last year. I think that was because of the necessity of the big nickel and all that stuff, you know, no linebacker. But to see that in training camp answered some of my questions about, okay, well, what's going to happen with these strong safeties on our roster? Like, where are they going to go? What is their role going to be? And it sounds like it's going to be, you know, you stop the run on the way to the passer and get sacks. Because he doesn't use robbers a lot, right?
Not really. I mean, he will switch up his coverage schemes enough to where, like, you gotta, sometimes you'll be a robber in there. Like he's not afraid of doing a single high look, but like you said, it's going to be split safety looks primarily. He loves the quarters coverage.
Yeah.
He's a lot of match pattern matching too. But you're not going to have Donovan Wilson in the box nearly as much as he was.
And that's crazy to me, because honestly, from what we've seen from him, that's where he thrives.
Right.
So now, looking at training camp, we get some questions answered. We see Donovan Wilson out there doing a lot of the coverage things when they're in that too high safety, which is nuts. It's just crazy to see it. Like, Dan Quinn did it too, but I never felt like that suited him. But he does seem more comfortable in this scheme doing that right now. And it sounds like Mike Zimmer is very fond of Donovan Wilson as well. So he's going to be on the field if he's healthy.
Yeah. And like, I always go back to like, Donovan Wilson's rookie year with the Cowboys in 2019, like in preseason, like, because when he was drafted in the 6th round, I don't think a whole lot of people thought that he was going to be the
I
Cowboys.
knew.
You
Did you
knew?
know? Did you know?
No.
Oh no, I seen.
I'll be honest. When he was drafted in the 6th round, and they said Donovan Wilson, I was like, I have no idea who this is.
Oh no, like I didn't know him, but this is before, that's 2019. What was I doing in 2019? I wasn't doing this. So I was just a regular person, I'm just chilling, and I
Yeah.
went and looked up as much film I could find on him, and I was like, oh, this guy has potential. And the reason why I thought he had potential is because most of the articles I read about him said he's very coachable, but he was just a Looney Tune, and everybody wants a little crazy in their safety.
Yeah.
You're coachable, but you play like he's a tone setter as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I always thought his willingness to stop the run was going to be valuable for the team, because Donovan, when he's healthy, he'll feel like a linebacker.
Oh yeah.
Little cuckoo cocoa puffs when he's on the field. He's super sweet, but when he's on the field, he don't care. So it's like, yeah, I thought he would fit. I didn't know how it was gonna look. But to your point, in preseason, he was doing free safety stuff.
Yeah.
We were him literally covering so much grass. I was like, wait, I didn't see this in college.
He had like 3 or 4 picks in the preseason. It was crazy.
What's happening right now? I felt the same way, but I was like, but I thought he would be doing more strong stuff like you were talking about, but he was doing free safety stuff, and I was like, oh, he's about to get on the team.
Mm-hmm.
He's about to make it. So yeah.
But then like since then, I mean, we haven't seen a whole lot of that, and I feel like he's going to get to flex those muscles a little bit in this Zimmer scheme, while also still like he's going to line up on the line of scrimmage more than a few times. He's going to get to blitz. Another thing, like Jordan Lewis is probably going to be the slot corner here, and he's also shown quite a few times in the past he can be effective blitzing out of the slot.
Yeah. And brought him on a nickel blitz at camp. I seen it.
Yeah. I mean, look, Mike Zimmer is going to have fun playing with these DBs, playing off of Micah Parsons. And of course, Zimmer himself is back in the day, a long time ago now, he was a DB coach. Like he comes from coaching the defensive backs. Mm-hmm. And he really asks a lot out of his corners, especially the outside corners. Deron Bland, we know he is anything but bland, as the great Chester Morris has coined. Trayvon Diggs, we know what he is. Obviously, he's on the PUP list right now with coming off of the injury last year. Mm-hmm. But one thing that's really stood out to me, the player that I'm most like surprised with so far in training camp has been Kalen Carson, the rookie that they drafted at Wake Forest, because he's been getting most of the reps with the ones on the outside, with Diggs not being ready to go yet. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many interceptions he's had by now, but I feel like every time I go on Twitter, I see another video of him getting an interception, or at the very least having a tough pass breakup. I see you flipping through your notes. I'm sure you're going to your Kevin Carson notes. He was a guy, when they drafted him, I was just like, man, that is such an obvious Mike Zimmer pick.
You thought
I was annoyed I hadn't thought of it yet.
Really? You felt like that? I was surprised.
Oh, yeah. He's physical. Like he loves, like when he would play press at Wake Forest, like he gets his hands on you, he's not letting go. Like, and I just like that's what there's a quote from Zimmer from I think it was back when he first took the Vikings job, and they were asking him like, what are you looking for in corners? And he was like, because at the time like cover two zone was like all the rage, and he's like you can go down to 7-Eleven and get someone who can play cover 2 zone. Right. If you're going to be good in my defense, you better be able to play press man. And I was watching Kalen Carson. I was like, this dude's tough and he's physical. Like, you got to have that to be good in press man.
Yeah. I was trying to listen. We're pretty far removed from draft, so I had to dig deep to figure out where my notes were on him. But I said, feisty competitor, very sticky. He takes this ish personally. He does. Like when you see him on the field, you can feel his intensity. When he sees it and he recognizes it, he's looking to make you look crazy. He's literally trying to embarrass you on the field. He's like, I'm serious. This is not he has an attitude to him, and I feel like with corner specifically, we talk about the confidence, but a lot of it is just like it's the swag, it's how you
Mhm.
carry yourself, it's how you present yourself. He has that. He has very fluid hips and awareness. Now he can get a little aggressive, you know. He can get a little aggressive, because and that's one of the things, and Dan Quinn talked about it. Is like when you have a sticky man corner, there are sometimes that there some of them are going to get penalized. Like
Yeah.
it's just the reality of it. It's kind of like a give and take, and I felt like he had a good balance of that in his game. Yeah, he's penalized here, but what he's really doing is trying to let this guy know, like, I'm gonna be here all day. I'm gonna put hands on you. You gonna feel me. And
Yeah.
sometimes you take some of that, but I do want him to, because he has got caught peeking a few times, kind of being, because he really is willing to be in the run game, but sometimes he can get a little too, excited and be peeking a little bit. So I do want him to be a little bit better, that he can improve in tracking the ball. He has ball skills. Clearly he takes the ball away, but there's times when the ball's in the air. I think he does need to improve on tracking. I guess we're taking a step in the right direction, since he's just getting picks almost every day in practice, right?
Yeah. It's the Al Harris effect.
Yeah, and there's some, yeah, oh, absolutely. Shout out to Al Harris becoming the DB coordinator, and you just see these guys, like, I know you've seen it at camp. These guys
Mhm.
look like they trust this scheme, and they're flying around. Now, we always expect defense to be a little bit ahead, whatever. But these DBs do look comfortable in this system right now. Like, we haven't seen a whole bunch of busted coverages or nothing like that so far to start camp. So that's indicative of what they think about the scheme. But yeah, he plays screens well. He plays the edge well. He's not afraid to come up and tackle and be physical. To your point, I wanted to talk about him a little bit, because I know you said you were unsure about him at first, and as soon as they drafted him, I said, "Oh, that's interesting. Good for us." Another one. Another one.
Right.
Yeah, I was happy with the pick. I was really happy with the pick, to be honest. So
Oh yeah. Yeah. No. And like, and I'll just say this too. Like, you draft a corner
mhm.
with Mike Zimmer as the coach, and you give him jersey number 41. Like, that is not an accident.
It's not an
Like,
accident.
they told him, like, 41 may not be as revered of a number in
No.
Cowboys land as 94, but
Mhm.
like, you give a corner 41 when you have Mike Zimmer, who coached Terrence Newman back in the day, who
There.
actually, when Terrence Newman went into coaching, it was with Mike Zimmer and the Vikings.
Mhm.
Like, that's not an accident. Like, he
It's not.
knows what the standard is. Granted, he's a little bit of a different player than Terrence Newman, a little bit bigger, but I mean, I'm so excited. The more I thought about Kalen Carson, specifically in Zimmer's defense, the more excited I got.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I pulled it back because I was like, he's not going to start because you got your three. Like,
Jokes
you
on
got Diggs
you,
and
buddy.
Bland.
What the ones?
I mean, when Diggs gets back, he's not going to be with the ones. Like,
Well,
unless we're
yeah,
putting Bland in the slot so we can get Kalen Carson out there. And then you've got Jordan Lewis sitting on the bench,
we'll
which is
see.
also a great guy to have.
No, I think Jordan Lewis has earned his spot.
I agree.
I think Jordan Lewis has earned his spot. I think Kalen Carson being, because you don't, again, I know a lot of people like to throw rookie corners out there real quick and just let them do their thing. And it's like, yo, corners to me are like kickers. You break their confidence too much, baby, it may not ever come back.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen, like, it may not ever come back. So if he's just a depth piece and he's a good depth corner for now, hell yeah. And with Trey, with Trey, I could very much so see them, if he's not playing in preseason or like revving up in preseason or whatever the case may be. I don't think he's gonna be on PUP too long though, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's going to be on there too long, so we probably will see him during camp. But if they're tempering his snaps, I do think that Kalen Carson will still be out there, because there's a vision for him. And we talked about the different coverages and the different looks and stuff like that. Zimmer might find ways to wrinkle him in there and to throw him in there, because I personally think I like the way he looks on the boundary. I think he can do some nickel stuff too if you need him to. So maybe he's someone else that you look at. Trying to look at the other defensive backs. Another guy that I'm keeping an eye on is Josh DeBerry stood out a couple of days. Like, he's done some decent things in the passing game, but really more than anything, it is Marquise Bell. I'm really, because we were just talking about safety.
Yeah.
He's a safety again, guys. He's not a linebacker. No more. So how Zimmer decides to use him and some of the things he wants to do with him will tell me some things as well. Eric Scott, this is a
Yeah.
sticky corner. Also, how does he fit? Is he just going to be the depth corner that we have in case someone says ouch? You just don't know at this point. So, well, we're getting more information, big dog. You got a DB that you're paying attention to that you like? That's kind of maybe not getting talked about that much.
I did back when we all got our the undrafted free agents together. Julius Wood was a name I really liked. I could see him like we were talking about with the safeties, like bringing them down, doing creative things with them.
Speaking my language, you speaking my language.
Julius Wood was fun to watch in college.
Oh, God.
I think he fits well in the Zimmer defense. But then the other thing too is like you got a lot of safeties right now. You got Malik Hooker, you got Donovan Wilson, Marquise Bell's fighting for he deserves snaps. Wanye Thomas shows he deserves snaps. Like you got a lot of mouths to feed. I don't know if like Julius Wood, it's going to be tough for him to make the roster. Like I think he's for sure like top priority practice squad at the absolute least. But I'm really excited to see how he pans out because I think he could really steal a lot of thunder from people.
I agree, and Donovan Wilson dealt with the calf last year, I believe, right? So it's not getting talked about a lot, but we're looking for Donovan Wilson to get back to his normal self as well. Because I didn't see that game wrecker safety in the box last year. I thought, maybe the calf was something that towards the end of the season, you start seeing him pick up a little bit more. Right. But I personally think Julius Wood is the predecessor.
I love to hear it.
I think
I'm a Julius Wood fan.
I am too. I think he's the predecessor, but I think he has a little bit more range than Donovan did come out of college. I think he has a better for the ball. He took the ball away quite a bit when he was at East Carolina, did some free safety and strong safety things. So he's one of my favorites too. I've talked about him numerous times. And to your point, if he doesn't make the team, he is for sure practice squad.
If he makes it through waivers, that is because a lot of other teams
like that's what I'm saying. Like it's either you're gonna put him on practice squad or figure it out, or he's gone. Somebody's gonna take him. The tape is too good. The tape is too good. The character witnesses, I went through all of his stuff. People were very fond of his leadership and how he really communicated with his teammates and stuff. This guy's gone, boss. So I wouldn't play no games with him.
I'm excited. We've talked a lot about the defense, and I think rightfully so. There's a lot to talk about. Before we really get to wrapping up, I do want to talk about the offense besides just CD and Dak. Because we've seen, with CD holding out, we've seen some more of these receivers. We've seen Jalen Brooks and Jalen Tolbert. They're kind of competing for that wide receiver 3 spot. Ryan Flournoy's flashed a little bit. Tyron Billy Johnson has been having a camp. It seems like every year we have this receiver that ends up not making the roster, or Dennis Houston does make it but doesn't last through the whole season, where they have this incredible camp. So far, it seems like Tyron Billy Johnson is that next guy that's having a great camp. But again, we're 4 days in. Who's caught your eye though so far on offense?
First of all, shout out to Jalen Tolbert because I think he is really solidifying himself as that third option for Dak, maybe second option, depending on who you talk to. He's just been reliable in camp. He had some of the surest hands last year where he was called upon, and we did see an uptick in his production when they did decide to start giving Michael Gallup snaps to him. I think he's on an upward trajectory, and when you look at he and Dak, you can tell their connection is real because Dak is looking for him in scramble drill. It always tells me a lot about a quarterback, about who he's going to when he's in danger. So looking at Jalen Tolbert, I think he is taking that next step, and I could see him being the wide receiver 3. But as far as you're talking about Tyron Billy Johnson, this is a guy that they brought back, and I'm not really, I try not to read too much into the practice squad stuff or whatever, but this is a guy that has experience. This is a guy that's played on a couple of teams. The speed is obviously there. He's a burner. He can run past you, but he also too he's sharpened up his route tree a little bit as well since he's been here in Dallas. He's taken it more seriously. He told me he wanted to show people that he wasn't just a speedster, and I think you're seeing that in this training camp. And so I understand that people say, there's always a camp person that people attach to or whatever. This ain't no fluke though. This guy's been here. He knows this system. They brought him back from the practice squad to the practice squad for a reason. And he does have if we were in a situation where a receiver was down, he has the experience to come in and the lights aren't too bright for him. He know what it is, and he actually can make some plays. So I don't look at him like a Houston. I don't look at him like that because he's been here. He's played in the NFL. Those guys hadn't even played in the NFL, most of them. And I think his speed also sets him apart when you talk about some of the playmaking ability. And he's definitely keeping these DBs who play well through camp on their heels so far. So don't count my guy out like that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we got plenty of camp to see what Billy Johnson does. All these other receivers too. Real quick, because I just thought of this, and I'm going to put you on the spot. No preparation for this. With pads coming on, specifically in the context of pads coming on and things changing just a little bit in terms of the intensity with these practices, 2 players for the Cowboys that we have not talked about yet, that you're like, you got to watch out for these guys. Who are your 2?
For me, it's going to be. Ooh, that's hard. Tater tots. All right. For me, it's going to be Justin Rogers. And it's going to be. It's going to be Brock Hoffman.
Nice.
And I say that because I think knowing what's going to happen with the center position is important moving forward. But I do think that seeing him go up against, because I was going to say Mozzie, but I'm like, well, he's going to be going up against Hoffman. So I'm going to be able to see and peek and cheat, whatever. So I'm like, oh, well, and as far as Justin Rogers goes, he's the next guy. You know what I'm saying? He's the only other I mean, I've heard some decent things about Denzel Daxton, but I've heard more about Justin Rogers and him being a space eater and him being hard to move and him being just a physical being. If we don't, and I'm not trying to wish no evil on him, Ricky Bobby, but if we don't get, kind of the flurry of excitedness that we want to see from Mozzie Smith, Justin Rogers is that next depth piece that you're going to be looking to maybe man that one tech spot. So what he looks like on pads, going up against a BB or a Zach Martin or a freaking, he about to get his tail whooped. You understand me? Zach Martin, Hoffman, and Tyler Smith on the interior. We'll see what he's made of. We'll see if he can take on double teams.
Yeah.
So those are my guys. What about you?
I was going to take the low-hanging fruit and double up with Cooper Beebe and Brock Hoffman because they're in this competition. You took Hoffman, so I can't do that.
That's fair. Okay.
But I'll still go with Cooper Beebe because I mean, they drafted Cooper Beebe and they're like, yeah, we're going to play him at center. And everyone was like, well, obviously he'll be the starter at center. And then, 4 practices, Brock Hoffman's the number 1 center all 4 times. And Cooper Beebe has had a couple of issues with some snaps so far in training camp.
Yes.
Which should be expected given, even though he was their backup center and had worked at the position in practices, he didn't snap the ball at Kansas State, not in a real game.
Right.
And so that's still something he's got to work on. But with the pads coming on, I think you're going to get to see the physicality that he plays with. And that coupled with what we already know about his IQ, it's kind of like, well, once he gets the snaps down and gets consistency with that, all due respect to Brock Hoffman, just talking about the ceiling of Cooper Beebe, I feel like if he does what we know he's capable of, he's going to lock down that starting center spot. And then as far as another one, man, because you took Brock away from me.
Give me a running back.
Oh. Okay, I'll give you 2 at running back. We'll double up here. Okay, So one is Royce Freeman, because I feel like I feel like I'm crazy, but I think Royce Freeman might actually make this team and be good.
No, you're not crazy. I said that already. I agree with you.
Okay, okay.
No, you ain't crazy. I think he got some burst. I think he has experience clearly.
He's tough too. Like
You're
he's not Derrick Henry, but like he packs a punch.
Yeah, I agree. You see
And
people head snap back a little bit when they had to tackle him. I agree.
yeah,
Okay.
I feel like he could be something.
Okay.
And the other one is Deuce Vaughn, going the exact opposite style of play. But I just feel like Deuce Vaughn, like, I mean, he looked great in preseason last year. That wasn't by accident. That wasn't a fluke. Like, obviously, once he got playing against first string NFL caliber players, he wasn't the same. But like, you expect that with someone who was taken as late in the draft as he was, has the size limitations that he has. But I just think he's had a year to get under his belt. He's learned the scheme a little bit better. He's learned a little bit better of what's expected of him. And I mean, he's a coach's son. He's a scout's son. Like, he lives and breathes football. I feel like there's no shot that he doesn't come back and looks just like light years ahead of where he was last year. And with the speed he has, with the shiftiness he has, I feel like he could turn into like a really, really viable pass catching back out of the backfield, with Royce Freeman, with Ezekiel Elliott as being those kind of short yardage, those pass blocking guys, and Rico Dowdle. I think probably Rico Dowdle will be kind of the main early down running back kind of guy. But between those four, I think you could get a really good running back group that together gives you a really solid run game.
I agree. I agree when you're talking about Deuce Vaughn. Number one, I think that he makes the team because of the special teams rules and ability to have two returners and just kind of how things are changing in that regard. I ain't even gonna lie to you. I'm still trying to get a grasp on it, but it's fine. It'll be good. But with Deuce Vaughn specifically, I agree with you. I think that Deuce could be very helpful in short yardage situations, running some routes and things like that in those short yardage situations, the short to intermediate game. Building his confidence, I think, is important, though. I'll say that. I do think that he definitely needs to be. I think that should be a part of what they're trying to do with him right now. It's just building his confidence within the scheme, getting him comfortable, and seeing, carving out a plan for him. Because when we were at OTAs and minicamp and stuff, they were using him in the passing game a lot, like for real. And I was like, okay, but then we camp and you don't see it as much. And so I think when the pads come on, just like you talk about offensive line and all that stuff, running back is when we're gonna start separating guys and knowing who's who and who's gonna be doing what. So yeah, that was good. That was a good one, man. That was a good one, man.
Thank you.
All right, as far as we already going down the list. So the last one, I guess.
Yeah.
Tight. Who is your tight end two, David? Who's your tight end two as of right now?
Luke Schoonmaker.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
He's a camp or something.
I think last year, if it wasn't for the injury that kept him from like really starting when everyone else did in camp, he could have actually challenged Jake Ferguson for the top tight end spot. Not that Ferguson.
You lost me, brother.
not that Ferguson wouldn't have still won the job, because we saw how great he was. But I just think Schoonmaker, like he can be a blocker, he can be a pass catcher. He's very athletic, and like because of the way the Michigan offense operates, he didn't really get a chance to show off just what he can do. Yeah. But I think when you pull up his film, like there's moments where you can kind of see that flash, similar to Jake Ferguson his rookie year, where we saw some flashes and said, hey, this guy could be special. And so I just think with Schoonmaker, really the biggest thing I think in his way is his own health and just being healthy. We know he's already had some injury issues this offseason already. But I just think if he's healthy, like the talent alone secures that tight end 2 spot. It's behind him where I'm really the most interested, because Peyton Hendershot has held on, and he's a scrappy dude, and I like him a lot. But you also got John Stevens Jr., who would have made this roster if it wasn't for that injury last year. And I'm very excited to see what he's able to do. He might even push Scooney for tight end too. Who knows?
I agree. And then you brought in the big dog, 6'7", 1,000,000 pounds from Minnesota, Brevin Spanford, who has the athleticism as well, has the frame, has the blocking ability, willing, aggressive blocker as well. With this team seeming like they're trying to get back to some of the things they want to do in the run game, I think a gentleman like him as well, pushes for position. So it's this tight end room has gotten interesting very quickly.
Very.
And if these guys do show up, then you have a very versatile room that allows you to run block well, pass block well, and to really be a threat attacking the middle of the field. So yeah, this tight end room we're gonna keep an eye on, man. I'm gonna be looking for you, big dog.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to watch. And if they all do like show up and show out like that, and we're talking about all of these tight ends, and it's like, how do you keep which one? Thing I'm just going to come back to is Lunda Wells, that tight ends coach.
He's amazing.
Does he deserve a raise or what? I mean, he's some other team is going to hire him away for some higher position, whether it's like pass game coordinator, offensive coordinator, something like that. He's a rising star for sure.
I agree. Lunda's a good
stuff
dude.
He's done with this room is incredible.
Yeah, and Lunda's a good dude, but he was last year about this time. He was very adamant, like, hey, watch that Stevens guy. He knew that this is someone that he fits. The thing about John Stevens is because of the size, but the receiving ability and him being a former receiver, he fits what a lot of people are looking for in a tight end now. It's someone that can really be a real threat to the defense. And he put on a lot of size this offseason. I think he said he gained 12 pounds, and it's mostly muscle. That's going to help him with some of the blocking stuff that he's trying to get used to as well. So yeah, you're right about him pushing people. There's a lot of competition at campus. Competition.
Yeah, and with the pads coming on, we're just getting to the good part too. So
it's gonna be good, dude.
Yeah, y'all be sure to follow along with us here at the Writer's Block. Follow Iisha on Twitter if you're not already. Some of the best insight out there, as I said at the top of the show. Iisha, it has been so much fun having you on here. Thank you again for coming on. Always great talking Cowboys with you. We're gonna have to do this again. Ideally when Brandon and Chris are back, because like I said, they've been fighting me on the Trey Lance thing. They fight me on the Royce Freeman thing. Like, now it's a fair fight. We got to bring you back.
Yeah, you're like, help me, somebody, please.
Yeah. So
I got you.
Yeah. So thank you again for coming on. Watchers, listeners, be sure to come back next week. Same time, same day. Writer's Block will be back with more coverage of Cowboys training camp, and we'll be getting ready for a preseason game, a real live preseason game. So until next time, remember always, go Cowboys.